Paradise. New Mondays and Tuesdays and stream on Hulu.
The Christmas Day schedule is out. Which teams belong? Which teams shouldn't be there? Plus Patrick Beverley on the move again, this time to Minnesota, and an extension for Joel Embiid in Philly. Are those two linked in some capacity? Plus, we got a Summer League championship game that we're going to recap for you and some general notes on Summer League. It's the Wednesday edition of Locked On NBA. Let's go.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Locked On NBA, the daily podcast covering everything you want to know about the association. And on Wednesdays, I'm your co-host Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and the host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast.
And I'm John Corrales, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast, at RedsArmy_John on Twitter.
We've got a pretty packed Wednesday here. We've got Summer League to recap, which we'll get into in the third. Slate of games at the start of the season, which is where we're going to start, John. So let's start with the Christmas Day game, because everyone's really excited for right now. Marquee day for the NBA. First one is Hawks at Knicks, then we've got your Celtics at the Milwaukee Bucks, the Golden State Warriors on the road at the Phoenix Suns, Brooklyn Nets at the Lakers, and then the nightcap being the Dallas Mavericks versus the Utah Jazz. For the most part, I'm fine with this, but let's start with you. Sure. Any team shouldn't be on there, or is this a pretty good slate of games?
I think it's mostly fine. You know, you got that Atlanta-New York rivalry. You got that Trae Young kind. You know, he's brought the Atlanta Hawks up to a level where they're must-see TV. They're in the slate there. Christmas Day? That's weird. If there's one team on here that I'm like, I would sub out Denver for the Utah Jazz. But otherwise, I'm okay with it. It's not an egregious error, but like it's not an egregious thing. But I think you got to get the MVP on here.
Yeah, that was my initial reaction was no Jokic on there, and I get, who knows what's going to be going on exactly with Jamal Murray, but it's still Jokic, the MVP, and he can carry them pretty far. And I get the Utah Jazz haven't been on Christmas in a little bit. They have Donovan Mitchell. They had the best record in the league last year. I'm just not really excited to see him on in this day, right? Like, I'm not that excited for that game between Luka Doncic versus the Utah Jazz. I'd like to see Jokic in there. I also am not particularly excited, honestly, about your Boston Celtics in this one. I think you could sub out the Celtics maybe for the Denver Nuggets and do Nuggets at Bucks and go the last two MVPs between Jokic and Giannis, and I think that would be kind of a fun game.
How dare you? How dare you, sir? Yeah, I get it, but I think Jason Tatum is one of the more popular players in the league, so they're going to get him on. You look at the jersey sales and some of the other metrics, Tatum just tends to kind of rise up. People like Jason Tatum, so he's going to get the exposure, and I think he brings some players in or some viewers in. So they'll skew Boston over some of these other teams. But this is where it gets interesting, right? Why is there no Miami? Jimmy Butler's marketable. Kyle Lowry is they've got a good team there. For them to choose like Boston over Miami is an interesting choice there. Philly, for all of the things that they've got going on, and maybe they just don't want to have that drama on there. But yeah, I think Chicago is an interesting team to not be there. They're a bigger market team, and they're interesting. No Zion Williamson, your guy.
Yeah.
Where's he in
the
this?
Pels have disappointed on national TV so many times that I think the NBA got a little bit gun shy with them. So to some degree, I kind of get it. that you don't need to see them losing by like 18 or whatever it might be on Christmas Day. The Heat was something that I hadn't thought about till you mentioned it, and it is a little bit surprising that not only are they not on in Christmas Day, they're not on in one of those marquee spots to start the year. So the season starts on Tuesday, October 19th. You've got Nets at Bucks, then Warriors at Lakers. Don't really have an issue there. Wednesday, you've got the Boston Celtics at the Knicks, and then we get Jokic, Denver Nuggets at the Phoenix Suns, which is going to be a pretty fun one after the whole Suns in 4 thing. Then you've got the Dallas Mavericks at this is on Thursday. You've got Dallas Mavericks at the Atlanta Hawks. So Luka versus Trey, awesome. You've got the Clippers then later that night against the Golden State Warriors. Then on Friday, you finally get your first appearance from the 76ers. Nets at 76ers, then Suns at Lakers. But no Miami Heat in that stretch whatsoever either, or Chicago, right? That's a big market that made a lot of moves and spent a lot of money this offseason, but also really tried to retool at the deadline too, going after Vucevic. It's kind of weird they're being left out, actually.
I do think it's a little weird. I mean, I don't see why Miami couldn't be inserted into one of these games. The Boston-Miami game would be interesting, although the New York Knicks are obviously going to get a game, right? They're still the Knicks.
Yeah.
And so they get the first. But look, let me just be fair here. The Knicks last season were a pleasant surprise, and this year there's a lot of hope there. They got Kemba Walker, so they've added players. They got Evan Fournier, so it's former Celtics involved in this game. It's Boston versus former Boston Celtics on that Wednesday night ESPN game. But to not have, they've hung their hats on Miami a lot over the recent years. I mean, Jimmy Butler got that whole Michelob Ultra, Hall & Oates campaign. Like they've really put a lot into Jimmy Butler, building him up to be a big star. And it's interesting to see where the NBA kind of sits on the Miami Heat, because very clearly they don't see them as a big enough draw. Like maybe they're just waiting to see. Let's kind of figure out how Miami works here before we move into the rest of the season. I will also throw out this. Does this open up because they're doing the investigation of these sign and trades. Chicago with their sign and trade of Lonzo, not on there.
Yeah.
Miami with their sign and trade of Kyle Lowry, not on there. Do they want to avoid having the conversation in these opening night and on Christmas Day, early season big marquee events? Do they want to avoid the conversation being, and the Miami Heat, a team that lost 2 draft picks because they've tampered with Kyle Lowry or whatever? Like that, I think that might also be part of this.
That's a really interesting point, because that would be one of the big storylines throughout this for both of those teams, right? Those deals aren't going to get undone. They're both going to have Lonzo Ball and then Kyle Lowry on the team. Nothing's getting reversed here. But you got to at least have that conversation, and when those guys get the ball and they're prominent players on both of those teams, it's going to get brought up, But also, would that maybe be what the league wants, to send a message that, hey, you tamper, there's consequences, but maybe this is also part of the consequences of it, right? We're not going to put you on national TV. Yeah, that's a good point too. This is
not on there. Chicago with Lonzo, not on there. Miami with Kyle Lowry, not on there. Toronto's never on there, so that's just sorry, Toronto. That's how it's going to be. But those teams that we're talking about here all kind of mixed up in this stuff, so there's your punishment. You're not going to get the marquee games. I'm sorry. So I'm sure there's going to be some punishment handed down. And we talked about it last week when you weren't here and I had Matt Peck on. It's a little kind of BS that everybody is jumping the gun, let's say, and because they did it too blatantly, they're going to, who knows how these teams are going to be penalized. But I do have a feeling that some of this has to do with that.
No, I don't hate that idea, and it does send to some degree a message, and these teams want these games, and the fans want these games, and this is saying, like, no, you don't get these things, you're kind of withholding something from them. I like it. They are heavy, I think, a little bit at times on the same teams in these, and these are competitive teams that are, people know. I'd also like a sprinkling of some of the up-and-coming, like, young guys. Like, I wouldn't hate to see Memphis and John Morant in here, or even the Charlotte Hornets and LaMelo Ball. I think both those teams, were worthy to fit in somewhere in this, maybe not on Christmas Day, but give me some of like the really, really young guys that look poised to be the next stars, so that in 2-3 years, when those teams, if they make the jump and they're regulars on this, the casual fan has some familiarity with them more so than what they might already have.
100% agree. agree in that, and you got to be careful of the matchups because you don't want to put, like Memphis is a good team. You don't want to put them up against Brooklyn, obviously. So you got to find another team that is kind of equal to them in who could you match them up with that's also interesting but somewhat equal. But I agree with you that the league, the one thing that they don't do well at all is showcase some of these teams that need more exposure. Like John Moran, I think, is a bit of a star, but not big enough where he's so recognizable that if you put him on national TV, the casual fan would be like, oh yeah, that's John Moran. Like, he's kind of like a tick below that. But the NBA does a terrible job of showcasing those guys. Like, you got to go into like the WWE model of sometimes you got to use your big stars to get the younger stars over with the crowd, and I think the NBA needs to do a better job of somehow attaching these bigger market or the bigger draws to some of these up and coming teams that need a little bit of exposure. The flip side of that is you don't want to have that result in a 30-point game, but you have to get creative and figure. Look, for example, the Boston Celtics right now are, I think, a great team that are good, but certainly not in the top tier of the East, but the middle tier of the East. Put them up against a middle tier or a team like that scrappy. Look, Memphis beat them last year in Memphis. I think the Celtics are a level of team with marketable stars that you can attach one of these lower teams to and say, hey, here's Jason Tatum, and oh, by the way, here's this player that we should be pushing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'd like to see, like the Suns are in there 3 times, the Lakers are in there 3 times. It's sometimes just kind of a lot for some of these teams, and you want to, not that they shouldn't be in there, but maybe get it to where you get some guys that just aren't on there enough to really try and lure the casual fans in a little bit more. But it's fun. It's nice to see that the schedule is being released. The full schedule is going to be released on Friday. We're going to be covering it here on the Locked On NBA podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, of course, and on YouTube as well. So coming up, trade with Patrick Beverley again on the move, this time to Minnesota. Joel Embiid getting a massive contract extension. Are they interlinked to some degree? We're going to get into that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On NBA. Before we get to that, though, this episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Sweatblock, especially the Sweatblock antiperspirant wipes. I live in New Orleans. It's hot, it's humid, it's the summer. It sucks when you sweat way too much, whether it's you're walking the dog, you're on a date, you've got a big presentation that you're just nervous and sweating about, or you've got an outdoor wedding. You never want to be self-conscious and kind of focused on your pits and not doing the best job you can wherever you are and whatever it is you're doing. You want to nail the presentation. You want that date to go well. You also want to maybe be able to wear white shirts and not have to wear black shirts out in the heat because you're worried about how it's going to look when you're sweating excessively. And that's where Sweatblock antiperspirant wipes come in. This isn't a life or death situation, but if you can get a bit of an edge to help you with that, certainly that's the way you want to go. And these things are doctor created and doctor recommended, and they're really easy. You just clean your armpits, wipe these things on, you're good for 7 days. They're going to last for 7 days. You don't need to worry about it after that. And they've got a dry shirt guaranteed. So if Sweatblock doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. And they've been featured and tested on Rachel Ray and used by firefighters, all different scenarios. These things are awesome. I used them the other day. We got a sample pack to try. Walked my dog in the heat of the afternoon here in New Orleans. No issues whatsoever. I was able to come back, jump on the Zoom calls that I had, and not worry about if people are going to be looking at sweaty armpits. So if you want to give these things a try, or if you know someone you love is dealing with them, you've got to check out Sweatblock. So get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com with promo code LOCKEDON, or at Amazon or CVS.
Now, that can be stressful, but there's something that can help, whether you're an elite athlete or someone like me who sits in front of a desk and a camera all day long. You can use Theragun. Theragun can really help. It's a handheld percussive therapy device that releases your deepest muscle tension using a scientifically calibrated combination of depth, speed, and power. And it's quiet, just like an electric toothbrush. The Gen 4 Theragun doesn't just feel good, it gets to the source of the pain by releasing tension using Theragun's signature percussive therapy, which goes 60% deeper than vibration alone. There's a reason why you see a lot of these elite athletes using these types of devices on the sidelines. It helps get that tension out of your body. So whether it's coming out of a workout or the stress of everyday life, there's just no substitute for the Theragun Gen 4. It's trusted by 250 professional sports teams like Real Madrid and elite athletes like Paul George, DeAndre Hopkins, Maria Sharapova, hundreds of thousands of customers. And so you got to go to Theragun.com and you get 30 days starting at $199. You can try it for 30 days for $199. Don't like it? Send it back. Not a problem. Go to Therabody.com/lockdown right now to get your Gen 4 Theragun today. That's Therabody.com/lockdown. Therabody.com/lockdown.
All right, we've got a trade in the NBA. This time it is Patrick Beverley still on the move, no longer staying in Memphis, but being shipped up to the Minnesota Timberwolves in exchange for guard Jarrett Culver and Juancho Hernan-Gomez. The other Hernan Gomez is what we call that guy here in New Orleans with his brother Billy. Hernan Gomi has got to be the plural for that, by the way, I think. So I kind of like this trade's a little bit interesting because it sets up some larger things here. One, I like this for Memphis. For a guy that they don't really have a huge use for in Patrick Beverley, they kind of do what they do best, buy low on certain guys and see if they work out. And if they don't, they just kind of move on from them, just like they did with Justice Winslow. Didn't work out, no big deal. No real loss here. It kind of sucks because it did seem like Patrick Beverley was really excited to be in Memphis, tweeting out like grit and grind, and you got to love guys kind of embracing going to a market like that. But now he goes on up to the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think there's something larger here, John, so indulge me a little bit in some conspiracy theory talk. We also just heard that Joel Embiid got a massive Supermax contract from the Philadelphia 76ers. It looks like it's going to be a total of it's a 4-year, $196 million Supermax deal. The extension keeps him there through the 2027 season. He's going to make a total of $261 million, a quarter of $1 billion. Okay, it's a huge investment in a guy that we've seen. It doesn't work with Ben Simmons. So it's got to mean Ben Simmons is on the move. Is this setting up Minnesota trying to trade for Ben Simmons? Either you move out D'Angelo Russell in a trade as part of that, right? And we can figure out the other pieces and all these things. Or does it also mean you could send Avery Bradley there to the Philadelphia 76ers? He's got a connection with Doc Rivers. Not Avery Bradley, I keep calling him that, Patrick Beverley, and sending him over there. There's a connection there, Doc Rivers, all of that. Or am I just kind of being crazy?
Well, no crazier than you normally are, which is good. I think that there could be something there. My issue here is that you got Karl Anthony Towns, and like Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell are tight. And you're still trying to build around Karl Anthony Towns. So I don't think they're in the process of trying to piss him off right now. So I don't think maybe the D'Angelo Russell thing could work, because you go from a point guard who's reticent to shoot to a point guard who's all too willing to shoot. So that's a breakneck speed change for Philly. That would be interesting there. But I don't know. I mean, who else are you sending Anthony Edwards over there? Is that part of the deal?
Yeah, like you would assume he would also need to be in a trade like that. I'm just wondering if this is acquiring either a replacement for D'Angelo Russell or a piece to include in a trade for Ben Simmons, because it does seem like the Timberwolves are a little bit. They're kind of in win now, right? Like I think they've tried this experiment somewhat with Towns and D'Angelo Russell, and like those two have just not played together over a 2-year period because of injuries and things like that. Like that, you can't even tell if that experiment worked or did. You can't even say it didn't work, right? Like it's a big giant incomplete because they played basically no minutes together. But if you have a chance to pair, say, Karl Anthony Towns with a guy like Ben Simmons, does it potentially work, and would you roll the dice on doing something like that?
I'm so down on Ben Simmons that I think that would just be terrible. But
I think that's fair too.
You know, like Karl Anthony Towns is. I mean, he definitely plays a face-up game, but he's not all that different from Joel Embiid. Obviously not as powerful, but he still faces up, right? So you still have a guy that's going to play outside and try to open things up for Simmons to drive, which we've seen Embiid do, and it still hasn't worked. So I just don't know. I don't know what's going to be the answer there. I think that Simmons probably works more on a team that's built around shooters rather than built around a big. So I just don't see it with Minnesota. Now, I can understand Minnesota saying we're done with this stuff and we're going to make the big swing, and sure, here's Anthony Edwards and here's D'Angelo Russell and let's go. And that would be enough to get Simmons over. In fact, would that be too much? No, that actually would kind of match up pretty well salary-wise. Yeah. So that could be enough for Philly, and that would be great for Philly. But I think it would be a bad move for Minnesota. I don't know that it's a precursor for anything. I think it is potentially Minnesota building up for, I don't know, just acquiring assets. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is a precursor for something. But I don't think.
No, it may not be. It's just, I don't know. It's they're in such a win now mode. I wonder. And look here, I just pulled the numbers up. D'Angelo Russell's played 25 games with Karl Anthony Towns. That's it.
Ridiculous.
Which is ridiculously just a small number. And maybe they want to kind of keep going with what they're doing and try and build that. And as you said, right, like there's always been the worry that Karl Anthony Towns is going to be one of those guys that kind of forces his way out. So you're probably not going to piss him off and get rid of one of his best friends and a guy that he really wanted to come on the team. I think that's a really good point in all of this.
Yeah, I don't think that that's the way that they want to go. I think they want to win. I think they want to keep Towns happy. He's got 3 more years left on his deal. This is probably the last year of everybody just kind of leaving Minnesota alone for the most part. I think we're going to start hearing some chatter by the trade deadline. I think next summer is going to be a big deal here. What happens this season is going to matter in Minnesota. Like what they end up coming up with is going to matter, and he's going to need to see some direction. They've just got new owners, so we're going to see what the new ownership does, how they go. Still a lot of flux in Minnesota. You have new coaches, new front office, recently new front office, now new owners. There's a lot that's been happening there. The stability there is shaky, and so this season is super important for them to just kind of say, all right, this ownership group believes in this. We believe in these people in charge. We believe in these players, and where do you go from there? I don't know if that is a big swing for Ben Simmons, if that's going to be the right destination. I keep looking at Philadelphia and saying they're waiting out Damian Lillard. They're waiting out maybe Bradley Beal, or they're waiting out the Golden State Warriors and their young guys that they just picked up. And what happens with the Warriors? Is Clay going to be old Clay when he comes back, or is he going to be some diminished version of that? Do the Warriors get desperate and say, all right, let's see if we can replicate Draymond Green? If Draymond Green is any diminished at all, can we replicate that with Ben Simmons and try to make one last run here? So those are the 3 teams I'm watching more than anything with Philly.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. This is probably a stretch. I said conspiracy theory right off the bat, somewhat, but they're in an interesting spot, I think. Also, briefly before we wrap up this segment, another extension on the books, Marcus Smart with the Celtics.
Yeah, 4-year, $77 million deal, the maximum amount allowed. I think it's a good signing for the Celtics. He's going to end up sliding into their starting point guard slot. I think he remains, even though his defense took a little hit last year. I don't think a COVID season where so many guys were hurt and he was hurt. I don't think that's something to kind of think is going to last too long. I think Marcus Smart's going to be a good starting point guard for the Celtics, and they're paying him as such. And hey, if it doesn't work, it's still a tradable number. And if the Celtics get in on one of these guys, Bradley Beal, if Marcus Smart needs to be involved in that deal, this number is good enough to trade. So, but I like it. I believe in Marcus Smart as a starting point guard, and I'm one of the pro Marcus Smart guys in Boston. So,
yeah. He's someone I would have loved to see in New Orleans. So there we go. Extensions, potential trades, and trades that actually went down. So coming up, we've got a champion of Summer League plus a couple more Summer League thoughts as that all starts to wind down. Coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On NBA. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On NBA brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar is basically candy bar that's kind of healthy for you because they're protein bars. They just happen to taste like candy bars. And in fact, they've got flavors that are like candy bars. I just ordered the Rocky Road flavor. That's a limited time flavor that came in. It's got marshmallow in it. It's unbelievable. Actually tastes like the ice cream, except that it's healthy for you, just like all of the Built Bars are. And if you check out the macros on these things, 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories between 130 and 180, so you're not wasting all that cardio that you just did. Only 4 to 5 grams sugar, only 4 to 5 grams net carbs. They are amazing flavors. The mint brownie is also one of my favorites. I ordered that alongside the salted caramel, which truly looks and tastes like a candy bar. They're all amazing. They're all tasty. They're all healthy for you. So if you want to give them a try, go to BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and you're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off over at BuiltBar.com.
BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. You could have bet on the Summer League Championship game if you were so inclined. You can bet on the WNBA, which is back, or anything else that's out there. It's all on BetOnline. So head on over, use your laptop, use your mobile device, create your profile for free, and then when you finally make your username and password and all of that, enter the promo code LOCKED ON, and you're going to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. So make it good. You're basically winning a bet right away. If you drop $200 in there with your first deposit, you use the promo code Locked On, you get a $100 welcome bonus. That's how it works. So don't sit on the sidelines anymore. Get into the game at BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Please gamble responsibly.
It is officially over. We've got a champion. It's not your Boston Celtics, John. It is, in fact, the Sacramento Kings after they beat the Celtics 100 to 67. So close there, right?
Oh man, a couple of breaks go the other way, man. This game. How lucky
that 33-point.
We got the NBA championship to podcast about. We got the Summer League championship to podcast about. I mean,
the same exact thing. It's got to do numbers with that, right?
What we do. Talk about championships on this podcast.
Look, Sacramento Kings, 2-time Summer League champion, and then look, they better be happy about that because that's like the closest they're going to get to any hardware.
The only thing that trophy is the only trophy they're going to hold for a while. Hey, look, the Kings were phenomenal. Davion Mitchell was great. The Celtics came out to a big early lead, and I was like, oh, here they go, Summer Celtics, unstoppable. Then Mitchell got onto Peyton Pritchard, and that was the end of it. The Kings defense clamped down. They've been playing great defense all summer long. This meant something to them. They wanted to win this thing, and Mitchell came in and lived up to
it's like the backhanded compliment of the century. Oh, this one mattered to them. It didn't matter to the Celtics, though.
I mean, they came in. Yeah, it did. It did. This mattered to them. The Celtics have been talking about development and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, look, it's two teams that are trying to develop in different ways. And let's be honest, we're not breaking any news by saying the Kings need to build culture. And you making something like Summer League important and winning Summer League, making that somewhat important is part of building the culture. The team came in, and that's the thing that they needed to hammer on top of individual improvement and assessment and evaluation. Coming in and saying winning means something to this team is actually, I'll give them the credit. Like, that's something that's important for the Sacramento Kings to believe in. And the young guys taking that into the season, they got to believe that what they're going into is a team that wants to win. So, congratulations.
You just redeemed yourself there. That was good. Like, look, you're right, though. It's got to start somewhere, and taking what you do seriously, even if it's something that's kind of meaningless to a certain degree, like Summer League, does say a lot about your professionalism and how you kind of go about your job. So, like, actually, kind of, I like your take on all of that. And man, Davion Mitchell, so look, he should be dominating, right? These older players that go into Summer League who have just more experience.
bunch of plates, so that's a thing. Hey, those are still early as shit. Good. Can't fucking see. There's a whole fucking bus. The goddamn bike rider. Please don't go right.
Look, they kind of vindicated themselves, but I think that was kind of
That's why you're here late, because you take your break last week, you fuck.